Um, so obviously this is a lot of schools for the student. So one of the things that, we're thinking about when we work with your children is like, is this too much? Is this so much that it's going to start to compromise the quality? And if it is too much, then maybe we should either remove some schools or do what we call wave two. Wave two, we would remove a school like, say, Brown. I'm like, my GPA is well below Brown. I know it's a long shot. I look at the deadline. It's, early decision. I'm not doing early decision there. I'm going regular. I don't even want to apply to Brown right now. I'll do that later on if I have time and energy. And we call that wave two. It's just getting it out of your hair for now. And students will just kind of put those off to the side. So then we have what we want to have, which is a wave one list where we feel like we can handle the workload, we can line up the deadlines, and we have a proportionality where I actually feel like I'm going to be stretching and reaching. I have some schools like in the orange and yellow where, I have to play a really good game, but I could grab some of them. And then in the green where we hopefully will consider those safe. And a lot of times this is where the merit money starts coming in over here. Some families will want more safe schools. Some families will want more reach schools. I warn everybody right now, in the next 2 months, I'll keep reminding you guys, if you feel like you don't have enough safe schools, it's always wise to add another one or two. And when we add safe schools, we don't add them to make Scott happy or Blue Train happy. We make it so that if you actually end up staring at that as one of your options, that you would go to that school. Because what we see happen, especially with all the wait lists that come into play, is that we have, a student that very good GPA. I'm going to throw a high GPA at you, like 4.65, right? The student's like, I got everything wired. Some students have a 4.65 and they're petrified they're not getting in anywhere. And some students have a 4.65 and believe that there's not a school that's going to reject them. So there is different personalities attached to these. But let's say the student has a 4.65, they didn't put enough safe schools on. They just put one on to make their mom or dad happy. They're like, okay, I'll put on, University of Oklahoma, and they just do it, right? When that student comes to do kind of like a college decision consultation in the spring, and we're looking at their options, and they're on 9 wait lists, and they only have like one safe school, and they're praying that they're going to get off those wait lists, but that's really scary. That's scary for the parents. That's scary for the student. That's like emotional. People get angry at each other. So a lot of times it's really good to kind of make sure you have safe schools. And safe schools, I had someone recently that didn't put a safe school on his list because he's like, oh, I don't even want to see it. I was like, dude, then that's not your safe school. Like if you don't even want to see your safe school on your list and you just want to kind of submit it just to get in that means you're dismissing that school so much that if it's an option that you'll have a hard time embracing it. So when I encourage people to make safe schools, I'm always saying like, it's your guilty pleasure. Where would you go and study and feel like you would have a really good experience? Hey, Kieran, really kind of, and it's a solid program, whether this is an ASU or an NAU or a Boulder or an Oregon, or like you name the school, Indiana. These schools are fantastic, Michigan State. And they're really not only fantastic, but they have a really decent bar of entry because they're very large schools in most cases. Large schools that give California students a geographic draw advantage, like Michigan State, that you can click that off, no supplemental, and have another option for a great school, great program. And we see this happening all the time. So the first thing is make sure your child has a balanced list. If you need to make sure that it's balanced and you want to set that up, just shoot us an on track. Like if your list is done, we don't even call that college list building. We'll just say like, we're just going to eye it up with you and like, hey man, you're going for engineering and all these schools are pretty kind of intense and you only have one school that you don't even like as your safe school. It's time to kind of dig a little bit deeper and find some of those schools. So balancing out your college list is first. The high school counselors are going to start to request the college lists because they're going to want to know whatever they have to do with them. Do they need to send a counselor report? Is it going to be connected through Naviance? And this is the one area where Blue Train can't kind of like tell you what to do, because every high school is going to have a different process. Like Redondo Union used to have to go into like their nest and like put a pink slip, and that would be given to like a spy that would crawl in a tunnel. It was like something really kind of like out there. Other schools will have Naviance. Other schools are using Score or Maya's platform, whatever it's called, Maya Learning. So you have to ask your school what, or the school will be sending out protocol on what's done. I do want everyone to know that if you are having frustrations with letters of rec and your school is being kind of snooty about it and saying you can't ask for any more, or we did it, or whatever it might be, there's always a workaround that you can get letters of rec to the schools without even including your high school in the loop. My son and I did not use the high school at all to submit all of his letters of rec. He was like, I don't want to go in and get the little pink piece of paper and crawl through the tunnel, Dad. I was like, don't worry about it. So we just got the admissions officers' email addresses, which was really easy. They're all on the blue list. We just sent the list of emails to the teachers that were giving the recs, and that was easy as that. And the teacher just sent it to those email addresses with the student's Common App ID. And so if you ever have a school giving you any problems, like we can't add any more letters of rec, that's super easy to do. Sometimes schools can be a little bit grumpy about adding colleges on the list later. So like, say like you decide at the last minute that you want to add, Wisconsin, or you want to go for Stanford. So right now, if your high school asks you to submit a list of schools and you want to add schools that you're not sure if you're going to submit to them or not, you don't know if you're ever going to get around to that Northwestern application or that, Penn State application, you might as well put it on the list, because it doesn't hurt to put more. Then you can always not send it and it doesn't matter. And just so you know, if you ever have a situation where your high school tells you that they can't do something, please reach out to me. I've called up counselors and go, hey, come on. And they're like, okay. What they don't want to do is they just don't want to set, like a trend that everyone's bringing in late schools, because that makes their life harder. But sometimes students genuinely do come across schools later and they want to add them. So about the college list. So to confirm, is the red zone listed on Blue List your 10th, 11th GPA? Yes. So there is if you go to the Blue List, there's a whole kind of description about what the red zone GPA is. And there's a little video describing what it is as well. That'll kind of tell you. But in short, when we were trying to figure out what the best way to kind of isolate one number that could be used, was it the test score? Was it something this, something that? We found out that 10th and 11th grade weighted GPAs were the best, because 9th grade is totally different at different high schools. Mira Costa won't have English honors. Redondo won't have biology honors. So they all have completely different offerings freshman year. 10th and 11th grade, most of the schools all start to balance out with the same number of AP offerings, and it becomes a much more kind of apples to apples comparison. The UCs do it this way. Although schools like, you name the other school, might look at 9th grade, and even the UCs will see 9th grade, the indicator here is the best kind of way to kind of build the vertebrate of your hierarchy. So you can kind of see it that way. And these colors will be, pretty accurate, unless you're going for we're still trying to fix the impacted major thing here. So if you are going for engineering specifically, comp sci is chopped off a little bit, but engineering specifically, and maybe like a nursing and some architecture programs are going to be competitive. So you got to think about that. But in general, these colors are going to be fairly accurate. And I do want to say that red doesn't mean like, oh, I probably will get into one of them. That means that these are reach schools for the student. Orange are high targets, meaning that it's weighted like 70-30 against you. Yellows are more like 50-50s. Light greens are like 80-20s in your favor. And then dark greens are usually like, 95.5 in your favor. So again, some students will just have one school that they really like, or two schools that they visited. Like I've gone to, you know, Boulder and I love that school and I'll happily, go there if my get in and my parents can, afford it and all that stuff. And so I think that, it's not necessarily just about the number of greens. It's either about the fact that that is a safe school you would go to, or you might need to spread a little bit wider because you don't know those safe schools. The number of schools you apply to isn't just like apply to 9 or apply to 15. I do believe that too many families make a list that's too small. Well, let me take that back. Some students take lists and they make them too small. They'll make like a 9 to 12. And if you go online, a lot of people recommend a 9 to 12 college list. That's really kind of shrimpy in my mind. Reason being, if we're talking about the UCs, a lot of times that'll be like 6 or 7 of your schools that you're applying to right there. And then a lot of students are putting on the Cal States. That's like 2 or 3 right there. So you're up to almost 9 or 10 right there. And then if you're going to even do the Common App, which most families end up doing, is the UC app, the Common App, and the Cal State app. And so they will do all 3. So if you're going to use the Common App, you want to squeeze as many schools out of that as you can without overburdening yourself with work. So what we'll send out soon, once everyone feels like their lists are settled, we send out a quick list that you guys can all look at with schools that have no supplemental essays. So if you just want to like add 1 or 2 with no extra work, you're like, oh yeah, I will add that one. We'll add that one. But by now we should really have had a pretty good look at our college lists, and we should really be thinking about it. And if your child is one of the children that didn't do a college list building or didn't look at the schools and they feel like they're overwhelmed now, a lot of times it's going to be hard to get them to dig in. But what I'll say is, like, if I work with them and say, take an hour or an hour and a half and make sure your safe schools are ones that you like. Because students are usually fine with their reach schools. That, University of Michigan, great, I got that on my list. Berkeley or whatever. But they kind of, as I said, fast track their safe ones. So if your child still needs to kind of do that, that's the one area I might say, hey, take an hour, click around in the blue list, look at some, videos, look at some tours, drop in, check out the clubs, check out the sports, check out the rankings and reviews. There's so much stuff there they can look at if they just get in there. So now that you have, let's pretend I have a list, and this one looks too big. So let's say I shrink this down to, I'm just going to pull some of these out just for argument's sake. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. So this is, I don't want people to spend a lot of money on applications, but sometimes I say 5 extra applications where you don't have to do a lot of work and you're not, doing much other than just adding it, costs you about $350. In the grand scheme of the college process, $350 is nothing. That's going to be like dorm decorations for, half the room. And I don't mean to scare you about the price tag, but that $350 might give you 5 more options of merit scholarships. It might give you 5 more options of experiences you weren't thinking. We really like families to have a hard April, meaning like I have choices and I don't know which one I want. Because we don't want you to have a hard April in the respect like, oh my God, I didn't get into anywhere. I didn't have the safe schools. We want you to be like, well, I got a really big scholarship here at a school I wasn't even thinking I was going to apply to. And then I got into the school I didn't know if I could get into, but I didn't get my major. And I got into, and like, so there's all these different things that play out. So I would try to creep up the schools if it did not impact my workload. Then I would start to, once I have my college list set, I would go to my app trackers. And I am going to tell you guys right now, it won't affect you guys because they do it on a staging site, but you'll probably come back here in about 2 weeks and it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be easier to use than it is right now. We're just kind of combining things and making it a little bit more slick, but it's still going to have the basic principle. So when you're on your hearted list, schools are organized from the most difficult to the least difficult in terms of admissions. When we go to the app tracker, we're really just thinking about the school in terms of their deadline or their status, which we'll see in a second. So first of all, deadline. If I open up a school, I go here, and it's going to give me this card, okay? And by the way, in your newsletter today, there is a tutorial right here. That's a 7-minute tutorial that's going to go over everything that you need again. And then there'll be the session on Saturday if you need it again, right? So if we go here, the first thing you can do is you can open up the school profile. All your information is over here. You know, your early action dates, your letters of rec required. And so I see this is on the Common App, early action, 10:15. And so I'm going to say, this is the Common App. And pretty soon this is going to be automated, but you still have to pick which date you're doing. Are you doing early action or are you doing regular decision? And so the student is going to do early action. And then when I save that, that is now going to be in the queue. So I will be doing, you know, obviously this one first because we're going vertically down. When I'm in this card, it's also asking me questions. I've created an account. Yes, I've created my Common App account. I have done the workshop, so I've done the basics. Letters of required 0, I gave them 0. I've made a rough draft of my activities. Yes. I have to do the personal statement and the supplement. And if you're working with a counselor, they'll be doing all this with you. So they'll just fill it all out for you. But they're also going to encourage the students to keep these up to date, because what's going to happen is these colors change to tell you, you know, is it not started? Is it partly done? Is it mostly done? Is it completed or is it submitted? And so the first thing we're having our students do now is they're getting all these down. And when I tell people in the beginning, and again, this is on track stuff. So if you're having trouble, you don't need to do this yourself, but I'm going to say this is November 1st. And then I'm just going to add these because I'm just going to show you the way this would normally roll out. Okay, I'm going to do this one. Early action is 10:15 at this school. That's another thing. If you saw in the newsletter over here, we did say that, you know, continuing toward a new trend towards earlier deadlines, a handful of schools, mostly Southern schools, have moved their EA deadline to 10:15. And this is the list of all the blue list schools that have moved it to 10:15. But that's new. They're creeping up. And then and we'll go over the other stuff in a second. So let me just add Florida State. We go early action. 10:15. And then University of Alabama, 11:1. Okay, we're almost done. I know this is not exciting watching me do this, but all right. So November 1st. And again, this information, you can get it how I got it. Another place to get it is you can go over here to your My Colleges tab. Again, we'll be doing this on Saturday. This is the Common App. The students should know this. A lot of them probably have already clicked on it. You can always go to this application's requirements, and this gives you a spreadsheet of just your schools and all the deadlines. So some people like looking at this, but either way, we would recommend getting it into this structure, because now we can kind of look at the order. So these 3 are October 15th, these 5 or 6 are November deadlines. And the first thing we would do, or an essay specialist do, or a counselor would do, would be like, all right, this is a lot of stuff to get done by November 1st. Like, there's a lot of schools. So the first thing would be like, what supplemental essays do these schools require? And we'll say like, all right, you know, for Maryland's easy. Let's just say that I looked at Lewis and Clark and it was a really long one and it was not one of my top schools. And then I looked over here and I looked at the financials, and there is okay, so there is a merit qualification here. that I need to get in by November 1st. And I might even just be like, maybe I don't want Lewis and Clark, or maybe I'll just try to like get the application in earlier. But that's the one thing that we're looking at when we're helping students make their timeline with the app tracker, is we're thinking first, my best practice is move everything that can be a potential early action, put it like tag it as early action to start. Then when we start to, these should be December 1st. Then when we start to actually look at the schools, start moving some from early action to regular decision if it does not affect their merit aid or if the workload is too heavy. So this is like when your children are working with their essay specialists, a lot of times they're working on essays, but they're also like, especially when we turn the corner into, Sharmay, those are just numbers that I put in for myself. Or were you talking about on the newsletter, Sharmay? I can't hear you.
In the newsletter, you listed a few schools that moved the early action deadline earlier, and you listed Georgia Tech, but I think the 1015 is only for Georgia residents because I looked at their website.
Oh, did it? Okay, let me see.
Yeah, there's an early action 2 that's still 11-1 for non-residents, non-Georgia residents.
All right, let me see.
You don't have to look at it now.
I mean, I'm just wondering why it came up that way. It might have came up that way in the all right. So
I don't know about any of their schools in your list. I'd only looked at Georgia Tech.
So then we go to Georgia Tech, and yeah, so they don't even give us a qualifier here. It just says EA 1015, but that might be, you're right. We probably would, that's hard to just kind of change on the blue list to make it specific, but yeah, I get you. So breathe easy, people who are going to Georgia Tech and are not from Georgia. All right. Once you get into this zone, this will enable you to kind of like see, what you have to do, how you're moving through the process. When your children are working with a specialist, there are 3 main chunks of essays. There's the personal statement, the PIQs, and the supplementals. You guys have all heard these words like ad nauseum by this point. Right now is the time where you really should be locking down your personal statement. Like should be the time, these next 2 weeks, that you're really putting the finishing touches on your personal statement. The PIQs should be moved till after November 1st if you're doing any early action schools, because there's no reason to be doing all this stuff when the PIQs are not due until December 1st. We don't want students waiting until then to do them. So we would like you to have what we would say, like, stable state drafts, like where you can look at them and go, okay, that's a draft. I may change this completely in November, but now is the time to finish the personal statement, start moving on to the supplementals for your early actions, and then going to your PIQs after that. This is all written over here in the newsletter, the big picture. It says here, start senior year strong, adjust course load, put your PIQs to the side, and continue to polish your personal statement for any early action schools. Collect, organize, and begin drafting your supplemental essays, which you'll be getting a link for tomorrow. And the students will always have access to that in their portal at any time. They can look at them. And then October, continue polishing your supplemental essays in order of priority, begin the financial aid process. November, and submit any October EAs. November, submit your early decision apps on 11-1, blah, 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 and we'll get there as we go. The one thing that I do say up here, the first order of business for all Blue Train families, we believe, is submitting your Cal State app. The Cal State app will be open on October 1st. The application is really easy. You just have to enter your grades, and then you pick a major and campuses, and you submit. The reason why we are asking, and we will say this as soon as October 1st rolls around, it's like, hey guys, don't delay on your Cal State app. It can be done in 45 minutes, beginning to end. So there's no reason to wait. Parents can actually do a lot of that. They can even do the whole thing if they wanted to, and just have your child sign it. There's no activity descriptions. There's nothing. Why is this helpful? Because schools like San Diego State, Cal Poly SLO, they do it on a rolling basis with a computer. They look at all your grades and everything. So if you think about it, and the school has like a range that they accept students, like San Diego State, we're accepting San Diego State, and Cal Poly will also look at the county and city you're from, because they do it demographically to spread out their acceptances. So they have a certain number of acceptances from the South Bay, let's say, right? And, some students are going to be automatic accepts, like, 4.9 or whatever it is for, like San Diego State. And then there'll be students that are on the borderline, and they'll be accepting those students. And then as soon as that fills up, they're not going to be accepting anymore. There might be a situation where some high caliber students come in and nudge out some of those, because they can't deny students that are so high, but they also know a lot of those super high ones are not going to end up accepting their acceptance. So it really does benefit families to get your application in early, so that if there's any space being, that the computer's collecting acceptances, you'll be on the front of that line. When I say early, try to just do it by the 3rd week of October. That's it doesn't have to be the first week. Don't have a heart attack if you don't submit in the first day. It can be the first 3 weeks. The UCs are different than that. The UCs will not start looking at your applications until after December 1st. They have a hold. So if you think you win by getting it early in the UCs, the only thing that's doing is getting it off your plate. And hopefully you've expired all your possible energy to doing the best application you could have, continuing what we said earlier today about, giving it your best before you submit it. So about these deadlines, does anyone have a question about or these guys here, I should say, EA, ED, what you should do, what you've heard? Should we do ED because we know it really gives us a boost, but the whole family's a little bit nervous because we've never visited the school? Don't do that. But does anyone have any questions about the types of registration? Sorry, types of deadlines? Anybody? All right. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, how do you make sure that your kid, for early decision, I mean, not direct admission, because I was talking to Matt earlier, and he wasn't sure if Indiana, for instance, still did direct admission. And I was just wanting to make sure how I make sure my kid checks that box, or what's the action item for that.
That's called, you do that on checkout. That's when you're actually about to submit the application. You will submit that. That will say, do you want to apply directly to the College of, Kelly College of Business, or whatever it might be. Indiana in particular had always had an automatic requirement for direct admission to Kelly, and they removed that this year. It's going to be more holistic review, which is actually beneficial for a lot of kids because they didn't have the unweighted GPA or the ACT score or SAT score. So it's going to allow more people, hopefully, to get into Kelly directly. And there are schools that, like University of Washington, where a lot of students will get moved to a pre-major, like a pre-psychology or a pre-business, and you can apply direct, but you may not get it. That's why when we are talking to you guys in the spring, we're often not just talking about school versus school. We're talking about which major at which school versus which major at which school. And did you actually get into the program, or are you in a pre-status? But in most cases, Chris, we will be recommending a student, if they're going for a major, to always click direct, because you can always try and not get in, but it's once you get in and you didn't, click it, then it's harder to actually get into it later on. So it's, some students won't, for example, a family might be like, well, I'll just use Indiana for an example, since we're talking about it. They'll be like, well, I know Kelly is more competitive than the rest of the school, so I'm afraid to click that because then I'm going to lower my chances of getting it admitted. No, you're not going to lower your chances of getting admitted. You're just not going to get directly into the business school. So they'll accept you into like what they call an exploratory status or a liberal studies status. And then you will have to kind of get good grades the first year or semester, and then you apply. I just worked with a girl this morning who she was Zooming with me from her dorm in NYU, and she's in liberal studies because she didn't get into the business, and she's already kind of like charting her path, which she's got to do X, Y, and Z to get there. So we would always want to get in there directly, have that as an option, and then we can always leave it behind. But if we don't get in, it's not going to diminish our chances. The only school that's going to diminish our chances is at Haas at Berkeley, because that, that's like a do or die. That's what you got.
Is that, I guess my question is that like somewhere on the FAFSA or on the, college board when you're signing up for your SATs, or where is it? I kind of remember there was a checkbox somewhere.
Where do you mean for direct admission?
Yeah, because
No,
my understanding.
That's when you check out here.
Yeah.
That's like when you're going through and you're answering these questions, and they'll ask you academics.
Oh,
yeah, and you'll pick this.
Oh, it's on the Common App. Okay.
Yeah, it's Common App. And
Okay.
it's not done until you're quote unquote checking out, which is right before you submit. We send something out in the coming weeks where we okay, so is that what they're doing at Ross this year? We've had students get deferred from Ross in early action and then still get into the school later. So I got to check to see if that changed, because a lot of schools made some overhauls. Michigan made, they moved to ED this year. USC moved to ED. So there's all sorts of changes, and it's, we're discovering things just like every year. You discover with every rock you turn over, there's a new flower or turd underneath it, depending on the perspective. But I forget what I was talking about. But at this, does anyone remember? Was I going? I forget where I was. Well, we'll be fine. We'll survive, everybody. So the important thing I think right now is to make sure. Oh, Chris, that's what I was going to say. I knew it would come back. Is that we're going to suggest that everybody with all their Common App schools take their applications right to the precipice of checkout. That is so that they can get it all like set up. Some students are still circling majors. They're not sure about it. Some students are a little bit overwhelmed, but we're going to want everyone all the counselors and specialists are going to be encouraging their students to go all the way up to the precipice of checkout, because last year, for the first time, there were secret supplementals popping out at the last minute, like a jump scare. Yeah, Shermay, trust me, I had the same face. There were some that there is one essay, I forget what it was, that the student didn't even get the prompt until after they submitted the application. And I called the school, I forget which one it was. It was a Southern school. And they were like, we know, everybody's complaining about it. We don't know what's going on. So what we do with our supplements is we go through and we trigger as many applications as we can to capture as many supplements as we can, which will be on the doc that goes out tomorrow. And will also be housed in the portal so students can look at it anytime they want. But at the same time, we know that if I'm applying to a music performance major, there may be an audition component. There may be a portfolio component. There may be an extra component if I'm doing a dual major at at Cornell or something like that. So we want everyone to kind of go ahead and do that up until, ahead of time, so they can trigger everything possible and not have any surprises. You will also hear us saying things like, it's okay to move an early action school to regular decision. Happens all the time. My son bumped a bunch of them. It's totally fine. The one thing we're going to check, though, before we move something from early action to regular decision, is that going to affect the merit aid? A lot of schools it does not, but that's one check that we want to do. And I did mention that the way you can do that is you can go to it's in this newsletter that we sent out today. There's a lot of information in there. So, maybe like bookmark that one in your email to make sure you have it to look back on if you want to. But Bob has a question here. Can students select multiple majors in the Common App if they want to pursue a double major at a school? Like that school I just brought up asked for an academic primary interest and a secondary interest, and that will be the case. Some schools will ask you, just to add a group of interests. It's not even a major, and they're almost kind of collating that into a major. So it's also going to be interesting how applications are evaluated with AI. Any of you guys that have used AI know that this would be a great way to kind of look at students' majors and interests and all that stuff and kind of put them in piles and organize them with a lot of mistakes. So ultimately, I think that this can be overwhelming. Like even this conversation tonight can be overwhelming. So what I really want to take a step back and say there's still plenty of time. We have families doing their meet and greets with us now that haven't done a single thing, haven't even started their college list, and they are good students. They're not like students who, very, very solid students. So I want you guys to know, as like nervous as this sometimes can make us feel, there's plenty of time in the day. The one thing I suggest at this point is if your child works at a coffee shop, Baskin Robbins, whatever it might be, don't let hours be taken from them by doing shifts. That's one thing. The other thing is occasionally it will be extremely helpful to your child to skip a period at school or to skip an absence. If you get to the point where, you know what, my child's burnt out, can't tell you how many kids have like taken one day off from school and just caught up on so much stuff. So I'm not saying that we need to do that now, and we're not going to try to set ourselves up to do that. But I think that understanding that, the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks for, those few early action October 15th, which most people aren't hitting any of those, majority speaking. The real first early action for most people is going to be November 1st. So, we have 7 weeks until November 1st. 7 weeks is a lot of time, right? And then you're going to have 9 weeks until the second round, which is the 15th, and then 11 weeks from now until the UCs. That's a lot of time, right? So tonight's conversation was all to like perk our ears up and get us ready, but also not to kind of make us feel like, we need to kind of pull up our pants while running and jumping on the train, because we're not at that point yet. Someone else just asked a question. Dawn, if submitting early action on 10/15, when should we schedule an on track to do last review of the Common App, specifically around the activities section? Okay, the activities section on the Common App is a much lighter like review than the UC app. So you could do a review on the Common App activities as close to a couple of weeks, a week or two before. Obviously you'd want to do it if it's done by then, but you could theoretically do a Common App review the day before you submit it, because it's that, not the personal statement, the activities. I know I just gave you like a little bit of like cold chill. I know, I get it. And we don't want you to do that, but I'm just letting you know that that's easy enough to do if the activities are there. The UCs, on the other hand, are a lot, right? Like, because we don't want to, like, again, the reason why we hope we're all successful on the UCs is because we take them seriously. And we look at those activities. I was on with one of our counselors yesterday with a new family, and I was saying to him, I said, well, what would you say to this family who's really caring about the UCs? He's like, do not dismiss the importance of the activities, because I think too many people kind of just enter it like in a rote fashion. And we'll get to the UCs later. The UCs, major choice and activities, but we shouldn't get that in our hair right now. We should really be thinking about personal statement, moving on to the supplementals. Personal statement, moving on to the supplementals. And then for early action, just like a whole review. On Saturday, for anyone that wants to join, what I would suggest doing is maybe going through and talking with your son or daughter about their college list and saying, like, how are you feeling about it? Are you, and then maybe even have them join with you on Saturday morning, or watch the recording. If you need an on track to do a review of your, kick the tires on your college list, let us know. That's what we're here for. This is the time of year when the most sessions are going fast and furious because we're, getting all, majors and everything all together. So this is the time when you use your tokens for things like that. So once your college list is finalized, your high school will start to ask you for things. You will start to respond to the high school. Hopefully you have a college list in hand. Then you will have their app tracker all set. And then what's going to happen, just the last thing I'll show you guys, some of you guys know this already. Once you submit a school, so say I go to Clemson, let's say I've done everything, I've submitted. Now all my submitted schools will now be in another category that we're not going to really even be thinking about until after November 1st, right? Or October 15th for some of you. And this will be all the schools that you submitted. And this is going to be very helpful because one of the things that's a nightmare after submission is students are getting emails from schools. They're being told to go to their portal, especially with the more that wait lists are becoming prominent, that you have to check, some schools like UC Davis, if you don't respond to their wait list that comes in your email or in your portal, within 5 days, you're off it again. You're done. So we really want to make sure everyone keeps themselves organized after they submit. So this will be all your submitted schools, and you'll be able to say, all right, I'm deferred. You'll drop your portal link in there, your password, and then you save it, and then you'll be able to click this, and you'll be able to open up all your schools, visit all your portals, and then write your updates. I need to submit this by then. And this will be a very nice way for you to constantly keep track of the schools after you've been, after you submitted. Of course, if you don't get into a school and you don't want to see it in your face, you can just get rid of that and hide it. That's something I learned from the film festival trackers. So this will be something we'll do later. So you're going to be using this from now until April, to be honest with you. And even those things like when you open the profile and you look at the school, because you will still be writing things, your students will be at least, like Michigan is going to ask you guys to write another letter about why you love Michigan. Wisconsin's going to ask you to write more about them. UCLA is going to ask you to write more for them. And when we start to get into that time of year, we're going to tell you guys how to play the long game. And the long game is basically to keep up your senior year grades and to keep doing things so that your updates, you can have a nice looking update for the school. So this is going to be like, we're going to be going down this field together 10 yards at a time. All right. The next 10 yards is going to be September. Personal statements, starting supplements. Okay. Any final questions before I leave you guys scared in your own homes?
I have a question.
Yes, Stacy.
Is there any way to kind of find out which schools, like if you're prioritizing which ones to apply early, that might kind of fill up like the Cal States? Do the private schools kind of do that? Are there some that it's better to apply early because of that?
So early action, most of those schools don't really prioritize the EA students. They just prioritize them for financials. The only schools that are going to do what the Cal States do are going to be automatically processed schools, like Texas for the Texas students, Cal States for the California students. Big schools like Arizona State with lower bars of entry do this. So there are very few schools, and those usually are not going to be a problem, for, Haley or any of the students that we're talking about here. So do you really want to be looking at your early schools more often than not, as long as we're talking early action, not the binding early decision, in terms of scholarship? Like which ones do two things. Which ones do the scholarships hinge on me applying early action? And which ones will I be able to get the work done for the school? So you use those two things to kind of check the wind and see if you should be doing it. So if you have a school that has a huge essay like a Wisconsin, and it does not affect, I might move that one to regular decision because it's not going to affect your acceptance, and it will allow you probably to get in a better application. Otherwise, you're going to be rushing that really big essay and you'd be doing yourself a disservice. Chris?
Is there a place where I can get look at the stats for like the impacted majors at UCs if you're going to strategize, kind of like if you're going letters and science, and you're thinking, oh, the major I want may,
It's
prevent me from getting in where I can get in more of not a side door, but kind of a semi side door.
Yeah, you got to be careful because
Okay.
it's a lot more complicated than that. Um, you can kind of I'll put this link in the thing tomorrow where you can click on them. Going into these deep things, it's not as simple as saying, oh, that one's impacted or that one's not impacted. If anyone's ever worked with me before on this stuff, I really like using this guy here, which is, and I'll drop this in there tomorrow too. This looks at, oddly enough, transfer students, how they go from an external school or even internally from one department to another, what their GPA range is they need to get into. And so these are all unweighted college GPAs. So what this allows me to do is not understand what GPA I need, but I can look at the comparison of difficulty of one versus another. And I can say like, oh, chemical engineering is way up here, and ancient Greek is down here. And that is kind of giving me a spectrum of like the difficulty level. There are certain majors, we always talk about the mountaintop philosophy. Certain majors are the mountaintop majors, like engineering, there's a few of them, architecture. If you don't land on there, it's hard to get up there, right? Like, so if I want to sneak into a school and I want to go in as like an agricultural studies major, and then I want to go really walk down the hall and be a mechanical engineer, most schools are going to be like, not so fast, dude. Like they're wise to that backdoor entry. So you do have to make sure a school is fluid on the inside before you start playing games like that. Like UC San Diego, very not fluid that way, because the way they're structured. UCI is more fluid. Cal Poly, not fluid as much as some of these other schools. So that's the type of thing where, again, we're not saying you need to do an on-track, but that's the type of thing we would probably suggest doing one. So we can kind of look, you can come up with your own theories, kind of have your plan and do that. And we'll just be like a shoulder to shoulder, another set of eyes and go, well, be careful there because this, that, or that. Or we can guide you through the whole thing. But I would be careful, because a lot of students will try to do things where they sneak in the back door, and sometimes they shoot themselves in the foot because the fake major they're taking is not represented by the breadcrumb trail of who they are. So they're sending like a dissonant signal. And so we would rather like look at the breadcrumb trail, lean into that, move the hierarchy to make it really show, and then pick the major that is most appropriate to that student's, because a lot of your children are writing their PIQs based on their major, their academic subject, or the things that they care about with the community. So it's important to kind of look at that and not just look at, cold numbers without an understanding of who your child is and how they're going to be viewed. So that's important. Again, I recommend that the UCs are a good one to do in November to set up an on-track. A lot of families come out of those on tracks with the final review going, okay, we moved a couple of things around, that felt better. So that you'll do that in November. Right now, again, we do the personal statement and the supplementals. All right, I got 2 quick questions, then we all got to go eat. It says, if your daughter or son is applying to an honors program, make sure to check the application due date, as they may be the same as the EA date. Very good point. On the Blue List as well, under the unique programs, there's an honors school link. You can look there. Another place to find a lot of information really easily for schools is, let me go here, is to go to the admissions box here, open it up, and the little how to apply box. A lot of times this is going to tell you about, pretty much all the things that you need to do. If there's anything special, do you need a portfolio, or, all this stuff is kind of very helpful. So the how to apply, which is in the admissions box right here, is a very helpful overview for those of you that might be looking for something that Bob mentioned, which is, be aware that if you are going for the honors college, and a lot of us like to apply to the honors college to our safe schools, because that's another little jewel in your kind of acceptance. A merit scholarship is nice, and so is an honors college, because you get a lot of perks from that. So those two things can be conjoined to kind of really compete against some of your higher target or your reach schools. If you get a lot of money in an honors college kind of prestige seat, first crack at registration, the nicer dorms, all that stuff, I see students kind of going that way. So I'm always all about, and also when we talked about merit scholarships being automatic versus discretionary, sometimes they will give the students who do the honors college applications more merit money because they know those students are more serious, and they're going to try to incentivize them, because the student really wouldn't go through all that work if they weren't taking the school seriously. So I'm all about that, as long as it doesn't blow up your workload. What about schools that track demonstrated interest? So if you guys want to do the really simple way to, you click this button here, demonstrate interest for every school on your list, and just get your name on that one. That one's not the right one. And let me open up a different one. And what's going to happen if you do this, they end up sending you, little things in your email, like Zoom meetings or stuff like that, and they can start tracking things that way. We're firm believers that demonstrated interest doesn't really begin until the coming months. Everything you did earlier, did you go visit the school? They really care about, now, are you actually showing interest in this school? Are you going on the wait list? This is when it's the most powerful. Like if you're on the wait list at all these schools, the UCs really don't care about demonstrated interest, but another school, Boston College, you're on the wait list. They sent you out, like they're doing a meetup in your area through that link, or they send you like a Zoom for all business majors. Those things are kind of important, or more importantly, when they ask you to demonstrate the interest with another essay, that's the most important. So you can always go through your list and kind of click on all those demonstrated interests and get all that email coming into you. It can be a little overwhelming, but at least you're on the radar and you can kind of opt in on anything you want to. As far as the UCs is really going to be about the demonstrated interest you do when they start requesting information in, after January. But yeah, so everybody, I think we're all going to say goodbye for tonight. This has been a long one, but a good one. I will be here on Saturday morning. I will send that link out tomorrow with the recording of this one, and so the stats that you asked for, Chris, on that sheet, and the other link. So otherwise, again, if you need anything, just go in your portal and request an on-track. Don't wait until the last minute. And otherwise, have a great rest of your night, everybody. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Scott.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.